Welcome to the Payment Shed podcast, the weekly podcast that dives into the big topics, trends, and people shaping the worlds of payments, fintech, and business leadership. With your two co-hosts, myself, Grant Evans, and Justin Hanna.
Welcome back to the Payment Shed podcast. Today we are joined by Marco Conte, VP of Product Data and AI at IXOPAY. Marco, welcome to the Payment Shed. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Grant. Nice to be here.
We always ask our guests to tell us a little bit about their background in payments, fintech, financial services. What's your story and what led you to your current role at IXOPAY?
So the first time I touched payments was 13 years ago. So I was at Western Union doing a payments and risk analyst role. I was there for 3.5 years. Then I moved to the acquiring side for another 3.5 years, actually, mainly in Germany and in Europe. Did some consulting and contractor roles for a few years. Then I founded a company which was focused on data intelligence for the payments industry. And this company last October was acquired by IXOPAY. Obviously, IXOPAY being a tokenization, orchestration, compliance solution was a perfect fit to bring as well data intelligence in the payments industry. And I joined in October, and now I'm leading all the payments intelligence efforts that we have in the company, including data and AI.
And that business was Congrify, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, brilliant. And that's kind of part of the core IXO stack now then?
Yeah, in IXO right now, like that is the part that we use for the payments intelligence, where we're really focused on, leveraging AI, machine learning, LLMs, and making data operations, let's say, in a 2026 fashion.
And we wanted to dive into kind of old payments landscape versus new payments landscape. The system is changing, but it's often said it's not changing fast enough, possibly in certain areas. So if we're honest, a lot of enterprise payment stacks today, they're still quite rule-based. They have wrappers on top of PSPs. It becomes quite a muddled ecosystem. What actually breaks first in these enterprise merchants when they're scaling?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? We see like in different geographies as well that things can be different. So like in Europe, often I see orchestration setups that are more advanced. This is due as well to the fact that we have a lot of different countries, different habits, a lot of different payment methods from the customers and the expectation that they have. If we go to North America, it's very common to see large enterprise merchants with one or two acquirers. Right, you have seen that over the years. So I think when you go on scale, as soon as one of your acquirers is not performing as expected or might go down, right? That's the first thing that breaks. And especially when on the other side, when you start having some kind of orchestration setup and you are at the beginning of the journey, those are really rule-based systems and they might not be flexible enough, right? So imagine having a logic that is not really, let's say, mastered or properly tested, and it goes down and suddenly you have a drop of 2% in your authorization rates. That happens, right? So when you change the way that your customers are paying and you go on scale, it's quite common. So.
Where do you think the biggest inefficiencies exist though? Is it the routing logic? Is it the retry logic? Is it just poor data utilization that we're seeing?
This can be a mix, right? It's not only a specific thing that might be causing all the issues. And then it really depends on the type of business that you have, right? The type of merchant that you are. Obviously, if you are a subscription-first merchant, it's completely different than a travel or, a merchant that is mainly accepting one-time payments or an omni-channel merchant, right? So those are different things. From my experience, I may see that data is always a big issue, right? You need to understand on time when issues are happening. You need to know straight away how to fix it. But if you have systems where data are so fragmented and it's hard to find the answers, right? Then the second part is how much time actually it takes you to fix something. If changing a line of code in your payment stack is so complex, then obviously that's something that's gonna make things very complicated. And how much flexibility you have as well in your routing logics. Everybody comes and says that they have intelligent routing. But what is intelligent routing, right? It's not sufficient to be able to simply have a fallback, but you need to make it very intelligent. And those are the questions, right, that you always have.
And what would you define as a fully adaptive payment stack then when you've got an enterprise customer doing it well?
Yeah, I think it's a few things, right? So first, imagine I log into my portal It can be an internal portal or an external portal. Now I want to launch a new payment method in a new country. I go there, one click, it's on my checkout. It should be like this. Obviously, before that, you need to have a contract with the provider or the pricing agreed. But from a technical perspective, it should be really one click. That's it.
Yeah.
That should be the first thing. The second thing is having answers in seconds, right? So you go there, you open your Slack, you open your whatever tool you're using to have your conversations. You ask a question and you say, hey, tell me what's happening with my payments. Tell me what happened yesterday. Tell me, 3 things what I should focus on. That's how it should be, right? And then the third part is if you are having routing logics, if you're looking at orchestration, you should have proactive recommendations. You should not be there and look at all your flows. You might have so many dependencies. You might have so many combinations. You should have a summary that tells you what is performing well in the transaction routing, what is underperforming, and what are the recommendations. How to do A/B testing, right? The things to focus. So I think that people really need some support and help to focus on the things that are really gonna move the needle.
From a merchant perspective, from all the research you guys have done and the customer engagement that you've had, what is the tangible revenue impact for these merchants that haven't got those adaptive setups, that are kind of living a bit in the past from a payments platform point of view?
Yeah, I think the ROI is first of all in the time to action, right? Imagine if you discover something now, in 1 minute, in 1 hour, how different is from discovering that a week later or a month later. How many customers can you save? How many more revenues you can bring to your business? How many chargebacks you can reduce, right? How many, how much fees you can save? So that's the first question. If you have the information, if you have the capabilities to quickly change, things, your settings, the time is the difference. The time is the ROI. And then depending on the business, obviously, you should try to do a before and after evaluation, and then you can put a dollar tag there.
Yeah, and I think we should probably call that out. Something I feel with this is we almost want to present in those merchant-facing views, hey, by switching this on, you would have achieved X amount more, or you've lost this. Put it in terminology where you're telling me there's actually a tangible impact. Let's give that a try this month. Let's turn that thing on, right? We maybe need to get a little bit better on that. And anyone that has AI in their job title is going to get hit by a few questions around LLMs from us. Sure. So let's get into the LLMs in payments. I think a lot of AI in current payments infrastructure is very much UI layer, right? At this moment in time, not a decision layer per se. So where are LLMs genuinely outperforming traditional models today, in your opinion, if anywhere?
Yeah. So when I talk about this topic, I always do a step back, right? I make a big differentiation between what LLMs are supposed to do and what machine learning models, for example, are supposed to do, right? So machine learning is not something new in the industry. We have been doing this for 25 years, in fraud prevention especially, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever you want to do anomaly detection, you want to do forecasting, you don't really use LLMs. The LLMs are consuming the information, are consuming the results to make it understandable to some people that might not be really familiar with the technicalities. So that's the biggest differentiation, right? And I look at that on how to identify anomalies. We bring it to the customers, we bring it to the users, we bring it to front ends, and then LLMs can take that information and basically have this sub-agentic flow where each agent has a role. Imagine you have an LLM which is analyzing the anomaly, another LLM which is running a simulation, another LLM which is finding a solution, right? So this should be really the parts. Obviously, right now, if you look at payments, if you look at data, there is this first layer where LLMs are helping you to understand. They come there, they give you an explanation of something that is happening. That's great, right? But we need to make that explanation actionable. And the LLM actually going there, taking the action with the approval of the human, the approval of the payment manager, whoever is doing payments, and moving forward.
And if we look at, routing and fraud specifically, and that's two areas where, there's been problems in payments for many, many years in terms of optimizing that and in reducing fraud rates. What's your opinion on what LLMs are adding to both of those things that weren't there previously?
Yeah. So the routing, as I said before, like it's really the focus, right? So I saw setups where merchants had like more than 500 possible, logics applicable at the end. That's insane, right?
Yeah.
When you go on scale and you have a lot of different markets, a lot of different payment methods, the routing logics, like you gotta be a scientist to understand what's happening, right? But we don't want, we don't want people to be scientists to manage our routing logic. So LLMs can help to, let's say, being the spur partner that you have, like a payment analyst, a payment strategist working with you, to look at the routing, look at the inefficiencies that you have based on the anomalies, and coming and making recommendations. So that's my focus right now, like looking at how LLMs can do that in the best way, with the right guardrails, without hallucinating too much, with the right access to the to the payments knowledge that is needed, and that's possible. The second part on frauds, you see right now a lot of fraud solution providers bringing LLMs behaving as fraud analysts, basically. They go there, they do a manual case review for like very complex cases. I recently saw like LLMs trying to give explanations about machine learning models, logics that were impacting a specific transaction. So I see that like taking some space in doing what's before was doing manually.
Is there a risk of overkill with it though? Because even with traditional fraud engines, there were occasions where you would have overly aggressive rule sets, right, that would actually decline what were potentially good transactions. And there feels to me like there's a risk maybe with some of the LLM models that they could, over sense check transactions to a point where good transactions end up presenting as bad. Like we have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That there is always the risk, right? So the question is like, how much freedom you want to leave to your agents, and this is going to be the question in the future, right? Where agents are going to be completely free to take action versus some scenarios where you want to have certain mandates, right? Similar to the agentic commerce. So we'll talk later about this. How much freedom you want to leave, right? And the same is if you're going to have an agent that is going to do like KYC for you, or some ML checks, or in payments some different stuff. You want to set up your rules. So if you have agents that are very specific, right, very dedicated to a specific action, the risk of doing something wrong is lower than having agents that might be too generic. That's a very important question, how you set it up.
And do you think everyone in the industry should be looking at it as something they need to be at least considering in part of their stack at the moment?
Definitely yes.
Yeah.
I don't think it's it's a question. I always say like it's not an if, it's a when, right? You gotta be ready right now, at least on the operational side, at least on the payments efficiency or payments optimization. You need to have it before it's gonna become like, let's say, something more adopted on the consumer and the payer side.
And if we look at IXOPAY in isolation, is there like a really good example you can give where you guys have deployed it? And maybe is there an example where you tried it and you're like, that's not ready right now, or let's come back to that one?
Yeah, I can give you the examples from my team, right? My team is working very heavily on data. So when you have multiple payment service providers, multiple data sources, even doing like decline reason codes, administration and organization becomes very complex. Imagine like every day you have like hundreds of new reason codes coming in. And if you have an LLM with some machine learning models automatically doing the updates, that works fantastically. Like you can basically automate 90% of the job. That's something that works really well. Cases where you expect LLMs analyzing massive amounts of data, where you just throw one Excel file and there's like thousands of rows, and you expect analysis. Well, that's a bit of a different story. I don't think that today that's the best application in payments, even though at certain points things must change. But I would say that that's not really something that you should do today.
And they can still trip themselves up, LLMs, with bad data being fed in or not the right, I guess, direction from the human user, right? They can still, you think it's going to go and create something you had in your mind, but if you didn't action it in the right way, it ends up spitting out something completely different as well, potentially.
Yeah, and that's always the question, right? If you give bad data, you cannot expect good results, right? So that's gonna be the thing. Also in the future, like it's all about how you instruct as well your LLMs, right? You need to look at LLMs as somebody that you are like a person that is new to the payments industry, where you are giving really good focus, really good directions, and then like the LLMs get smarter day after day, and they're gonna reach your results, and outperform it at a certain point.
If we look at then the payment manager role in 2026, and we maybe jump ahead 3 or 4 years to 2030, do we think we're looking at a role right now where you have teams of what you currently classify as operators that are operating systems that are suddenly going to become designers who are designing systems, but actually they're not going to be operating them anymore?
Yeah, I think that's gonna happen eventually, right? So the payments manager role is gonna become a payments strategist role, right? Now in the industry, we know many people that like to call themselves payment strategists, but this is gonna be a job title in the future. Like you will not expect to be so operational as of today. You will expect to have a team of agents, right? If right now you have a payments analyst, you have a payment specialist, you have a payment like whole operation role, this is gonna be gonna be with agents, which brings to the question of like any role will become agentic. So you really need to know how agents work and how to set them up in the right way.
Do you think the days of dashboards are numbered then? Because actually the dashboard would generally be somewhere you'd go and action things, but half the things you used to action in there might be automatically handled by the AI now, right?
Yeah, I think that's gonna get out. That's gonna be outdated at a certain points. Everything. I mean, there is already a trend right now where everything is becoming conversational.
Yeah.
So going into a dashboards will become going into an interface and asking, hey, tell me what's happening. I need to do a presentation to my CFO today, and I need to focus on all my costs over the last 3 months. Please build me a dashboard looking at only at those things, and tell me what to say to my CFO because like he likes red and blue. So
it's where my mind goes with this now though. Like your payments team turns up and you've got like the green floating head and you go, yeah, hey Hal, how's the payment stat looking today? And you are interacting with a more humanized AI potentially, which is terrifying and exciting at the same time, I think.
It is exciting. I mean, see it in a way where you will do a lot of dynamic dashboarding work, but this will not be so strict as of today. You will not need like another team, a BI team coming, creating this, or you doing this in whatever tool you're using. It's going to be like, okay, I create my dashboards, I do with AI, I put it there, I reuse it the next time. I want to change something. I ask to my agents, please go and modify something. It's going to be a completely different experience, achieving better results.
Do you think payment teams will start to shrink as a result of this, or do you think we'll just have, I guess, a different skill set needed within those teams?
I think it will be a different skill set coming in. So I started to use like this term, which is being agentic or agenticity. So like people really need to know how this works, right? And you don't need to be an engineer to understand that. It needs to be somewhere around that. And it's similar to what software engineers are expected to do in the future and to be in the future. They are not going to code so much as of today. They're going to be more architects and orchestrators of agents that are going to produce the code. So in payment teams, the same thing is going to happen. And I see like more becoming a role where you go within your organization, your organization, you explain to people payments. You're more a payments evangelist, right? You manage the relationships with all your providers. You spend more time in strategic projects rather than being so operationally involved. You're gonna have your agents doing that, but you need to administrate and manage your agents. That's gonna be very important.
So, what skills will become non-negotiable for someone in your team when we get to that 2030 sort of point that I talked about?
That's a great question. So first, I think really understanding how technology works. Today, like in the payments industry, we focus a lot on how like the payments technology part works, but how LLM works, how to set them up in the right way. So it's gonna be like working a lot on this, and I believe like everybody will at the end like need to understand these parts. That's gonna be a non-negotiable at a certain point, which might require a bit of reskilling, right? But I think that this topic is gonna be so central in every function in the future that it's gonna be a non-negotiable.
It's very interesting because I feel like you see organizations where they are being quite restrictive over staff accessibility to some of the AI tools that are available in market. And my mindset is very much like you should let them have as many as they possibly can and work out which ones are going to make them the most effective at their job. But there's still a bit of fear, particularly in larger organizations, that kind of exists at the moment. I was going to ask you, not an easy question to ask, it's an orchestration platform at heart, right? But do you think that AI is going to make orchestration layers even more critical, or is there a risk to orchestration layers from, do you guys have to diversify your stack? And, I asked this to fraud platforms. You can ask this to any vertical SaaS platform, because everyone's saying vertical SaaS is dead. And I'm saying, well, actually, no, the best vertical SaaS platforms are just making it, again, a core part of their critical infrastructure.
Yeah. I don't think it's gonna kill it, right? I mean, sure, you can create code like much faster today than in the past, but like managing infrastructures, right? Is the critical part. It's gonna be faster for companies to deploy things, but then if you want to have this, let's say, only one technology stack, it's very hard to replicate when you go on scale. Very few merchants globally can really call themselves internal orchestrators after spending how many years in building this. So I don't think it's going to be replaced. I think the expectations are going to change quite a lot. So the bar on, from a service point of view, from, the functionalities that are required to perform on a certain level are going to be much higher. So the expectation is going to be to have like orchestrators that are really agentic, where data are truly managed in the right way, where there are proactive recommendations, where there is proactive anomaly detection, where LLMs are embedded everywhere. So that's something that now, it's already there.
Do you think there's a benefit as well to the fact that quite a lot of payment stacks are legacy? So, the nuance that maybe orchestration layers have had to go through of plugging into these quite complex, dated systems that maybe they won't let AI access, shall we say, possibly, right? They're going to want still sort of traditional connectors plugging in, and they're saying, okay, well, you guys can do what you want with AI, but we're not going to let your AI hit our system. Like, it's an interesting topic of accessibility as well, right, with third-party LLMs.
Yeah, and the accessibility it's always a big question, but we need to ask ourselves, first of all, what do we need to access to perform in the right way, right? When you connect to an acquirer or a payment service provider and you put an orchestration gateway or layer on top, or even an in-house orchestration, you are trying to replicate a payment flow. You're trying to replicate 3D secure authentication, an authorization, a capture flow, a sale flow, and all the other things. The data sharing behind the post-settlement parts. So the intelligence layer comes before, right? You don't need to, the intelligence layer is going to be needed in the future, like from a coding perspective, to optimize the integrations, to make sure that, your integration is like deeper than the integration that you have today. It's up to date, within minutes rather than hours or days. So that accessibility is not going to be a big issue, in my personal opinion. Cloud intelligence is going to be applied before. The big difference is going to be like in the speed that you have, right? If you build an agentic technology stack, you're going to be much faster than what you used to be in managing all of this.
Yeah. And if we look at kind of payment assistance, if I'm a merchant doing 500 million plus volume card turnover, let's take in this example, what does an AI payments assistant do in the future that is really going to drive measurable ROI for my business?
Yeah, I think this reconnects to what we said, right? Time to action. So right now with my team, we built a Slack extension for our AI payments assistant. I go there, I chat, and I say, hey, tell me for this merchant what's happening, right? But imagine 1 year ago, 2 years ago, did you have this opportunity? Now, if you are the only person, or you are a 2 people's team in a company that is doing half a billion, it is actually how it works in many cases.
What sort of stuff's it spitting out when you ask that question though? Is like, okay, today we're seeing this trend, volumes are up in it. Like, how is that presenting back?
That's coming back to saying okay, this is what's happening, right? Those are your sales, and look at this payment method. Like this payment method is underperforming, or look at this country. This country now has a 10% drop in the authorization rates for MasterCard. Okay. But this comes with a simple question. I don't have to go and ask many questions because we trained it in a way that it looks and it knows already that 90% of the issues are usually around payment method performances, by schemes, by country, on bean level, on recurring versus not recurring, on if network tokens are being used or not. So it goes already it is instructive. We built a knowledge base, a RAG that knows from a payments industry point of view what are the most common issues, and without asking goes there and screens everything. So that's the power, right? And again, if you are a very small payments team, one person is on vacation, for example, it's summer, the other person is traveling to a conference, where we always go, nobody's looking at payments. So then you have your agent looking at that. So you chat, you ask for a question, it will come back, it will give you the answer. You go to your engineer or to your orchestration or whatever layer you're using, you go and you change it, right? This is ROI. Before, it wouldn't have been possible. And then the question is how much money did you save to your business? In a year, if you do $500 million and you improve your authorization rates by 1%, it's quite some money, right? Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned network tokenization, because I think what IXOPAY have deployed in the market is probably best in class utilization of that at the moment in terms of multi PSP. Was it TokenX? Is it the product?
Yeah, that's TokenX.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. There's a whole separate podcast to talk about that sort of stuff, though, I'm sure. So where would you see the fastest win for a merchant right now, talking about that system? They've got the Slack deployment. Is it failed payment recovery? Is it routing optimization? Is it cost reduction? Where are the wins coming at the moment for that customer?
It can come from all those dimensions. It always depends, first of all, from where you're starting. There are payment teams that could work with me tomorrow, and we could build amazing stuff from the merchant perspective. I've seen merchants really having amazing technology. They could just outsource it to everyone and use it. 10 years ago when I was at Western Union, the gateway that we had there, it was literally it could have performed better than 50% of the payment service providers in the industry. So it depends on where you are in your stage. So merchants need some work on performance optimization, on cost, simply because they haven't been looking at that yet, right? If you are at the beginning of your payment journey, you want to make sure that you get paid. You want to make sure that your customers are not having a bad customer experience. So you're not really looking at optimizing your interchange fees or looking at your scheme penalties. That doesn't exist. But when you're on scale, at the end of the month, you look at your invoices. You don't want to pay your penalties. You want to predict your penalties, because after 1 week, you want to change something. That's a completely different setup. So it depends on the maturity where you are. And on orchestration, I see the same thing. So merchants that are new to orchestration, they start. After 1 year, they come with completely different requirements because they got experience. Now they understand their business in a better way. Now, they made that step.
Yeah. And similar to my earlier question, I guess, on that Slack, just because I've got it in my head now, I'm just visioning this Slack thing and I'm talking to it, right? Is there anything that hasn't worked with that Slack product that you've built where you've gone, okay, yeah, there's still a gap somewhere in the system for that?
There are some small gaps. Obviously, depending on the data that you have or might not have, certain things might not be possible. So we are working quite a lot on that, and there is a specific vision where basically whatever you can do right now with any LLM, any tool, is going to be possible via those internal tools that have access to your payments data in a structured way.
There's that prompt point as well, isn't there? When you think about, you talk about that, oh, okay, this country's got a 10%, drop-off rate, right? At that point, you're then getting to the discussion of, okay, let's say it's a MasterCard issued card, we're seeing a 10% impact. It nicely leads into the kind of final section of our discussion today, talking about kind of machine to machine. But my vision there would be then, okay, well, system has a way of contacting MasterCard and saying, hey, MasterCard, for our big customer that's doing 500 million, we've noticed in Hungary, there's a 5% or 10% drop off on auth acceptance running today or this week. And like, can you tell us what's going on? And like, then the scheme model starts talking to the orchestrator model, starts talking to the merchants model. Like, is that where we're heading with it? Or are we a long, long way away from that?
Eventually we might get there. I think, the big question is not going to be so much on the schemes. Like, the schemes are the party in the middle. They are the rule makers. What's going to be on the issuing side, right? That's the bottleneck right now that you see with the many merchants. Like, merchants are spotting issues. They spot a specific, issuer not performing well with their specific payments. Now, if this is a top 5 issuer, is a top 5 in the country, you might have a contact there, right? You might be able to reach out to somebody. But if this is issuer number 50, then, how are you going to reach out? And even if MasterCard is going to have an agent giving you a response, what is the response going to be? Thank you. We're going to write to the issuer.
It's a very relevant one for me. Obviously, in my day job, I work for Global Payments WorldPay, and, a recent experience of trying to find the right contact at a specific bank around a transaction. And it literally was that conversation of like, there isn't a system for this. Who knows someone at the bank? Like, and then you go on this, I can imagine payments teams constantly in organizations doing this on a daily basis. Like, we need a contact here, we need a contact there. So that human dependency that of that person's in that department is likely the person you need to ask that question about that thing or authorization or 3DS or whatever it might be, right? It's still a big part of the industry.
It's gonna be now, like, there's the question of adoption as well. Like, everybody in the financial industry is looking at a certain level of usage of AI and LLMs. Now the banks, especially financial institutions, so how much are they going to expose outside, right? Sure, there are internal use cases, but let's say it's a different beast, right? It works in a different way. In the payments industry, especially from the technical providers, we are much faster. We are much more innovative. Like, we look at innovation. But let's say we are from a different angle, right? So it's going to be a big question. Like, we have agents that can spot the issue, can communicate with somebody there, but especially when there are operational processes involved from financial institutions, how this is going to work. Eventually, we're going to find a way, but it might not be tomorrow.
Which nicely leads into agentic commerce, because I feel that's like an eventually question for me in terms of where we're at now versus where we're going. But if we're going to define the end state probably of agentic commerce, if agents are initiating the transactions from a customer, the optimization loop is ultimately changing, right, behind the scenes. So who owns the objective function, cost, approval, speed, etc.? Like, where do you see that heading?
Yeah, this is gonna change quite a lot, right? I think the first step is really recognizing and making sure that your systems understand that this is an agentic transaction, right? That's gonna be the first part, because expectations are gonna be different. So you want to validate an intent first of all. You want to make sure that, let's say, that agent is instructed to do a specific thing. From a consumer perspective, it's gonna be kind of the same as well. Like, I want to make sure that my agent buys what I'm expected to buy, right? I always make the example of, I want to have blue shoes because I like blue. I don't want to have my agent buying red shoes, which is like the basic hallucination that might happen. So from a provider perspective, you need to recognize that. You need to make sure that you can differentiate if it's an agentic or non-agentic transaction. And then, like, what are your system gonna do? Like, you might end up in a situation where you have an agent internally that is monitoring your volume, and then depending on the distribution of agentic transaction, is gonna decide if specific logics are gonna be applied or not. So it's gonna be agents evaluating transactions initiated by agents. Yes, it's going to happen. But then you're gonna have like the payment strategists and payment managers setting some thresholds, deciding how much delegation there's going to be to agents. Like, you might say, okay, an agent can take an automatic routing decision as long as it doesn't affect payments by more than $1,000.
So we are going to shift from merchant-defined routing to agent-defined routing then?
I would say, yeah, it's going to be a hybrid. So if I will be, the one like in 2 years or in 1 year, setting up an agentic routing setup, I would probably say, let's try to automate 80%, where the business impact is important, but it's not that big. So we put a monetary threshold or a certain amount, a certain count of transactions that can be affected. But then when we go above this threshold, there has to be a human in the loop. Like if something goes wrong, then, somebody's going to...
Even from a customer perspective, though, you talk about red shoes, blue shoes, like you'll probably have some customers, when you do online supermarket shopping, there's like, oh, we didn't have Heinz baked beans, but we had Asda's own, well, most Brits are going to put Asda's own in the bin. I'm sorry, like Heinz is the goat, right? So, you'll have some customers that be like, yeah, fine, I'll take the replacement. But you'll have, as an individual, you'd have to define, I want these shoes, but hey, I'll also have them in green or blue if they don't have them in that color. And you'll have the other one that's like, no, I only want them in blue, right? That's what I asked you for. I don't want you sending me the red one. And yeah, that's going to be an interesting journey to go down. How do you think you prevent agents from optimizing locally and maybe destroying global economies? That's quite a loaded question, but it's a valid one, right?
No, it is valid. I think it's all a question of the guardrails that you're gonna place, right? I think we're gonna really go into the direction of just setting some limits and some thresholds. And some companies or some teams might be more comfortable in giving more freedom to agents. Some are gonna be okay, the agent is gonna be like somebody recommending me things, suggesting things, but it's not gonna be actually the last approver. So it's gonna be a refiner rather than a definer, right? Somebody defining things. And in this way, you're gonna mitigate quite a lot. So I think that's gonna be a way to handle this, because otherwise you might end up into routing logics that nobody understands. They're gonna be changed each second, and it's gonna be a bit too much. So
yeah, and I think the nature of the models learning the way that different acquirers, different issuers, bins perform is part of that sort of debate around why acquirers particularly have to keep up with this, because they don't want the model saying, this website uses X acquirer. Last time I went there, it wasn't performing very well. I think maybe we're going to go and get our shoes from these guys this time because they have this acquirer that we know quite likes the information we send to it and performs better, right? That's quite a terrifying prospect for payments companies, I think, as well.
For payment companies, yes. I mean, definitely, you don't want to be, let's say, evaluated, right? You don't want to have your merchants being evaluated on the on
merchant impact too, right?
On the impact. But that's something that, let's say, what's going to be the goal of the LLM, right? If you instruct an agent to do a purchase for you, are they going to think about the case where payments are going to fail, right? They're going to expect the payments to succeed. And at a certain point, if the infrastructure works in the expected way, there can only be, most likely it's going to be soft declines. The number of hard declines in the payment industry is supposed to be reduced if the credentials are correct and everything is managed in the right way. Now it's going to be a big question if you're a merchant that is not ready for agentic commerce and uses even the fraud setup is not correct, and then a big number of your transactions is gonna fail. Is this gonna make an impact on how an AI company is gonna rank you? Maybe yes, maybe not. We will see that.
In your opinion, what would be the single biggest risk to a transaction that's not initiated by a human?
I think from a merchant perspective, first is really to make sure that you can recognize that properly. Imagine if you are very static when it comes to fraud detection. So that's going to be a big risk, right? The risk of having an impact on your performances, on your authorization rates. That's going to be the biggest differentiator in the future. Companies that are ready for agentic versus the companies that are not ready, there's going to be a huge gap. And at a certain point, if a customer has to decide between two merchants, if a customer has to let an agent decide, it's going to go to the one that's is going to have a purchase performed at a certain point. So that's a big risk. Obviously, some merchants will need to handle the relationship with the customer in a different way, and offer a different experience. If you're not ready for that, that's another risk. The list can continue, but let's say
so lots of risks basically.
But
but lots of benefit as well.
Exactly, there's a lot of opportunity. If you do it right, the opportunity is massive.
And do you think that, you know, today's PSPs, the schemes, do you think they remain relevant, you know, front-facing brands in an agentic commerce world, or do you think they become very much commoditized pipes that we don't talk about as much in the future?
It's gonna be very relevant. So you can see right now what's happening, especially in Europe. Europe is a playground right now for agentic commerce. Like in each country, the schemes are launching ecosystem programs with issuers, with acquirers, with merchants. There are end-to-end transactions performed in quite some European countries already. So the schemes are playing a fundamental role in adapting infrastructure. The acquirers are the ones moving the money.
Yeah.
So, and taking, you know, the financial risk at the end of the day of the transaction. So they're gonna stay there and play an important role. The technology providers they need to make sure that like all the different protocols, the ones that are gonna come, the standards that are gonna be there in the industry are gonna be supported and, you know, easy to use and easy to manage from a merchant perspective. So I don't think that the roles are gonna disappear. I mean, they're gonna change a bit, but still somebody, you know, will have to move money for you. Will have to put the rules, and will have to allow you to connect to the different parties.
I think for me, it's probably gonna be the most interesting sort of 5 years that we've ever had in the payments industry. And look, it sounds like you guys are massively prepared for the next phase of where we're heading. And there's a final section of the show, the Shelf of Shame, where we ask all of our guests to nominate something from our wonderful industry of payments and fintech to banish forever, something that really grinds your gears. What are you nominating for us today?
So this comes, you know, from my job and what I do. I don't want to see any Excel spreadsheet or anything happening anymore in the payments industry. So I will banish this. I hope that by next year, by 2030, with agents, with LLMs, people are going to forget that those even exist when you're analyzing payments.
I think that's a great shout, actually, and something we've ever had. Can I add banish the PowerPoint in there as well? Because I also think we can do better than PowerPoint as a tool. But no, I'm more than happy to banish Excel spreadsheets. You know, we've relied on them for a long time, and you know the data that we have can be better utilized, presented, and serviced for sure. So yeah, I'd be more than happy to banish that one forever. Look, where can people find out more about IXOPAY, what you guys are doing, and where can they get in touch with yourself and your team?
Yeah, I mean, we have a strong presence in Europe and Northern America, so there's a lot of people to contact when it comes to data topics. Payments intelligence. Happy to connect on LinkedIn with anyone. We go to a lot of different payment events, as you have seen. So happy to connect to the next ones as well.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us on the show today, Marco.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.